Hi friends! A short message before we start the episode. Every time we meet a new scientist, we love to chat with him or her over a good coffee or tea. So if you like the show and want to support our work, here are 2 ways to do it. The first one is to go on our page Buy Me a Coffee by following the link in the show notes and to offer us a coffee. Simple, effective, and we won't forget to thank you. The second way is just as simple. Just share your opinion about the episode on Twitter by tagging us at Lonely Pipette. We won't miss to answer you. Thanks again for the sharing and à bientôt!
It's exactly my philosophy. I will write everything on a to-do list, like turn on computer. On days where I feel unproductive and I feel like it's going to be challenging.
Right to-do list.
Right to-do list. Yeah, because it gives me this sense of satisfaction immediately. You know, I have turned on this computer and then I'll deal with whatever actual thing that I have to do. And sometimes I'm more realistic and I know myself and I say, okay, set yourself up for not failing right off the bat. Because I agree with you, Renaud. I think that if you write a super long to-do list, it can look so daunting that you don't even want to try. You're just like, oh, I can feel like I'm going to fail, so might not as well try.
Are you working in research, trying to do the best science you can?
Are you a team leader, a research assistant, postdoc, PhD student, or any other type of scientist?
Are you looking for a place where you can sit, relax, and listen to inspiring people?
Well, we have good news for you. You've just found what you're looking for.
Hi everybody, my name is Renaud Pourpre.
And I am Jonathan Weitzman.
Welcome to the Lonely Pipette,
helping scientists
do better science.
My name is Ana Boskovic. I study developmental biology at the European Molecular Biology Laboratory in Monterotondo, Italy. And I feel super happy and also a little bit intimidated to share my tip with the Lonely Pipette.
Ana Boskovic studied molecular biology at the University of Zagreb in Croatia before coming to France for a PhD with Maria Elena Torres Padilla at the University of Strasbourg. She then did a postdoctoral research in the lab of Oliver Rando at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, studying epigenetic inheritance in mice. In 2001, Ana became a group leader at the European Molecular Biology Laboratory in Monterotondo, near Rome in Italy. Her lab studies how the gene regulatory mechanisms which operate during the early stages of mammalian development influence cell fate decisions and developmental trajectories. Ana, thanks for coming to share your tips with the Lonely Pipette.
Thank you for having me.
That's great. Thank you very much, Anna, for being with us. I don't know if you had the time to listen to the podcast, but I see you say yes.
Yeah.
So you probably see where I'm going because we always start the same way. I hope our listeners are not getting bored. We don't. So can you just tell us, just to start, what was the spark that ignited your passion for a career in science?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, let me preface by saying that, yes, I do indeed listen to the podcast, and my lab is also an avid listener. We share it with everyone. Yeah. And so when I told them about the invitation, they had a field day. I think this is going to follow me forever. So I hope I don't say anything, super weird or embarrass them in some way. But yeah, we're all very stoked about this opportunity. And about my spark for research. So I was thinking about this, and I remember some of the sort of the earliest time points when I was starting to get interested in science or in biology, I guess specifically, is during elementary school. I remember that we had a very good teacher in biology who was not only, sort of proficient in their field, but they were also a really good communicator of science. And I think that really made me kind of fall in love with the subject, even though I wasn't particularly keen on like plants or animals or dissecting animals or anything like that. Because I've heard a lot of your guests talk about being interested in the world around them and nature. For me, it was really kind of understanding how things work in a cell or in an animal or in a plant. And this was directly kind of related to that person who was teaching biology in my elementary school. But I was also interested in many other things. And so in the end, we had to choose a focus during our high school. And I went to a grammar school. So I studied languages predominantly. It was more humanistics based. Because I thought for a minute that I would work in communication or something related to languages. And so that was a bit of a detour from the science. We took biology and chemistry and physics, but it wasn't the primary topic of what I was studying during this time. And I remember thinking, well, this is not particularly challenging. And this makes me sound so bad, but I never found it to be, some people are born with talent, more talent for math or physics. And I think that I'm sort of more gifted for languages. I can pick up languages very quickly. And so I figured, that's not that challenging to me. And do I really want to spend 4 or 5 years of university studying something that I already find a little bit like meh? More power to the people who go with that direction. It's absolutely not a criticism towards, more linguistic type of approaches. It's just that I found it to be a little bit unchallenging at that time. And so I thought, well, I really always liked biology, and I started becoming familiar with molecular biology. And so I said, okay, why not? Let's do an entrance exam. So to enroll in university back home at that time, we didn't do it on a grade-based system. You had to go through an entrance exam. And so the subjects that I had to take were physics, chemistry, and biology. And so this was a bit challenging because, as I said, this wasn't the primary focus of my high school studies. And so, but nevertheless, I said, okay, why not? Let's try to do that. And then I went to an entrance exam, both in molecular biology at the University of Zagreb and also medicine. And through some, dumb luck, I got into both. And that was kind of a turning point. It was a decision-making point that I thought, well, do I want to study medicine? Because back home in Croatia, if you get a degree in medicine, if you become a medical doctor, a physician, your job is pretty much set. Like, you're set for life. That's great. You have a good career. I don't know if that's the same in France.
It was maybe less and less.
Yeah. Not anymore, I think.
But that's kind of let's say, the reasoning back then. Well, maybe I didn't study medicine. It's still related to biology.
Were there scientists in your family?
No, actually. My dad is a literature professor. Well, now he's retired. Both of my parents are retired. But my mom is a engineer. So she's a software engineer, actually. So she's a woman of STEM, which is nice. But yeah, anyway, I thought about medicine. I said, well, I don't know. I'm not that motivated for medicine. I'm much more interested in biology and how things work at a molecular level. I kind of see it less of a tool, more of an opportunity for discovery. And so this is how I got into molecular biology. And I was a good student. I wasn't the best student, but I was a good student. Had good grades. And then we had this 3+2. So you do 3 years of bachelor's degree and then 2 years of master's. And I think I really became super interested in science during my master's degree because it was much more focused on real molecular biology of the cell, neurophysiology, like many things that were very kind of specific and not so general. Molecular virology, subviral infective particles, things like that. I thought that was fascinating. And at the end of it, I had the opportunity to do an Erasmus, which was the first generation of Croatian students who could participate in Erasmus. And I said, okay, let's do that. Let's apply. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I wanted to see how science works at different places. And I had the opportunity to do it. And I moved to France. I went to AgroParisTech for 6 months.
All right.
And that was really a formative experience for me. It was really, you get into the lab, you have your project, you're sort of left, not to your own devices, but you have a great deal of independence in project design and management. And of course, I was very well supervised. I had a postdoc who was taking care of me and teaching me things because I had not had that much experience on the bench at the time. And I thought, wow, this is really great. I really like this type of work. And there's this immediate satisfaction of having a result. You do your Western blot or whatever gel you were running that day and you see a result. And I thought, wow, this is great. Even though I had this innate fear of breaking something in the beginning or things not working. And oh my God, maybe that's the worst thing ever. But it was a master's.
I broke stuff.
Yeah. I broke
the stuff.
It's the rite of passage. And I think people don't tell you that necessarily. But it is a rite of passage. If you break stuff, what can you do, right? It happens. And the master's degree was on bacterial biochemistry, believe it or not. I worked on tyrosine kinases in bacteria, which, as you probably realize, has nothing to do with developmental biology or epigenetics or the mouse embryo. But it taught me how to do basic molecular biology. Like I learned how to clone a gene, I learned how to express a protein in vitro, and learn how to do kinase assays. And I still think this is the foundation of my research. I think it's really important to know how things work and to build your own tools when you can. But I had heard of epigenetics. It was a relatively new field, I guess, at the time. This was like 2010. I guess not that new, but for me, and I thought, wow, epigenetics, sparkling genetics. It sounds great. What's that? Let's look into this. And we had a teaching assistant who had done a co-tutelle with Geneviève Almously, which, of course, at that point, I didn't know who Geneviève Almously was. Sorry, Geneviève. And he gave us he was one of the teaching assistants. We had a course with him for a couple of months. And I thought, this is really cool. This is gene regulation. So for my PhD, even though I had an offer from my master's supervisor, for my PhD, I said, why don't we try, let's figure out if somebody does epigenetics, if there are any open positions. And I contacted Maria Elena Torres Padilla, who is my PhD supervisor. And through some, stroke of dumb luck, I got the position in her lab. And I guess, this is where my real scientific
That's
journey.
Great. She's a season 1 guest.
I remember. Yeah. This is
everything
part
is
of
connected.
Just do it.
Just do it. Exactly. You have to go for it.
Love it.
Have there ever been times when you thought about leaving science? What kept you in?
So, this is something I also thought about. And I don't think I ever thought about leaving science, but I did think about maybe leaving academia, because I'm sure academia can be very challenging. And I thought, well, there's this constant uphill battle of convincing people that you know how to do the things that you know how to do to get funding and to get positions. And so this can be a little bit discouraging, specifically considering the timelines that it takes to get academic positions. So my job hunt for PI position was a rocky. And I know some of the mistakes that I'd made along the way, but I don't think that I've ever considered leaving science per se.
That's interesting, because we wanted to talk about that with you, about setting up a lab.
Yeah.
Because so you had your postdoc, and now you're group leader since 2021.
That's right.
I remember well.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you decide that you were ready to set up your own team? And
yeah, that's an interesting question. So I don't know if you're ever ready. I think this is a little bit of a kind of combination of circumstances. So when I was a postdoc with Ollie Rando, I felt like towards the end of my postdoc, I felt like a relatively independent researcher. I was supervising a lot of rotation students. I was kind of the go-to local molecular biologist on the bench, of course. Whenever Ollie wasn't available, people would come to me, and I thought, okay, I can handle this. But sort of the catalyst of setting up my own lab started when I got invited to apply to a position, to a institution in the United States, even before my paper came out. And I thought, this is too good of an opportunity to pass by, because I was anyway sort of halfway thinking, okay, it's time to transition into independence, but my paper hadn't been out yet. And so this was a bit of a mistake, because you don't have a paper trail of what you did. And so this was kind of the starting point of my job search. And then you get rejected for sometimes obvious reasons. And it takes a toll on you eventually. And so you have your application, but you're not getting the position, even though you're interviewing, and back and forth and back and forth. And so I thought, well, that's quite annoying, and things take a long time. But then eventually, through, again, circumstances and tenacity, and sometimes it's really all about the fit. I'm now in Rome, and I'm super happy that I'm here, because I think I fit here very well. And it was very clear that some of the other positions that I applied to, it simply wasn't the right fit. And I always thought, well, they say this when they want to let you down gently. But in fact, it's really important that you fit into the place where you work. It's not just for you, it's also for your lab.
How do you know? What is behind these fits? Like, how do you?
Yeah, I don't know. When you know, that's not an answer.
Is it the culture, the food?
It's a combination of things. It's really multifactorial. I think the environment is super critical. If you feel like you are in an environment that is supportive and not competitive, as a junior investigator, I think that's critical. And I think the welcome that I got from the EMBL, and not just the EMBL in Rome, but also EMBL across sites, has really been overwhelmingly positive. And I thought, well, this is perfect. I don't feel any type of competition with even more senior researchers who, of course, are at an advantage because they have labs set up and so forth. It was really supportive. I think that's super important. Part of it is the facilities, so the people who surround you and the scientific support that you have within your institution that allows you to do the research that you want to do without waiting forever. That's another thing. And then part of it is also your lifestyle. And I think that's not a trivial point. We're all married to our projects to some degree, but at the end, you have to have hobbies outside of work, and you have to be sure that you're actually living a decent life, a fulfilling life within the space that you're at. And so I'm Mediterranean originally, and I really, I vibe with the Mediterranean lifestyle. But I can also understand that it's not for everyone. Rome is a bit chaotic and the public transport fails every now and then. So for me, it's a combination of things, really.
So for people, if people don't know what the EMBL is, that's a European Molecular Biology Laboratory. If you don't know, you should go and listen to Edith Hurd, who was in season 2. And it's a network of labs across Europe that offers obviously a lot of support and immediately a community. Did you take a management course or something that would help you set up the lab? And how helpful? How was that helpful?
So I took a management course. We were actually mandated. It's a part of the onboarding process of all the group leaders. And I think, certain aspects of it were helpful. And I remember certain things that they taught me during the course. Unfortunately, everything had happened over Zoom because I started my lab in 2021. So I took the course right before that, and everything was still virtual because of the pandemic. I think it was very helpful to build a network in the sense that all the group leaders who were hired in 2020 and were starting towards the end of that year in 2021, we were called the MBL newbies. And we set up a Slack and everything. And so this was incredibly helpful because we helped each other during the growing pains of lab setup. And of course, there's many sort of more technical aspects of the management course. For example, one thing that was emphasized is that when you hire people, you should maybe think about hiring for what you're lacking. So let's say you get a person who is really good at a certain aspect, but you have a void that you need to fill within the lab. And so don't hire 5 of the exact same personalities, but rather hire for what is missing at the point. And something that really stuck with me, and I took that very seriously, is that you should always be yourself, and the people can really pick up easily on people who are disingenuous, who are trying to become or project something that they're not. And I was like, great, I will take that because I'm so extroverted and blunt, and I thought, well, there's really no point in pretending to be some much more politically correct person, or so what you see is what you get.
Great. Very great. So you touched it just in your previous answer. You talk about like parts that were more difficult to launch or setting up the team because it was in 2021. So of course there were the COVID crisis. Can you share with us one of the hardest part of setting up your own lab, either related or not to this difficult time?
Sure. So I think maybe the most challenging part was hiring people because everything had happened virtually. And I think you lose a lot when you don't have a face-to-face interaction with the people you're going to presumably work with for the next 5 or 6 years. And so this was a little bit challenging, and I had never experienced that before because, when I was a postdoc, I was hired through an in-person interview, for example. And so I think that was maybe the most difficult part. Not just for me, but also for people who were hired at the time, because they had the same issue. They knew me over Zoom, and I could have been a completely different person over Zoom because it's a limited interaction of 20 minutes or 1 hour or something like that. So that was different and maybe unexpected. Again, through a stroke of good fortune, I think I hired very nice people who not only are good scientists and dedicated researchers, but also seem to get along with each other very well. And I think now we place a lot of emphasis on onboarding new people so that they are integrated within the team as best as possible. I place a lot of emphasis on lab culture and making sure that people fit in and that they feel welcomed. And in fact, whenever we interview students here, one of the feedback that we get is that the community is very welcoming in our unit. At least the community is super welcoming, and they come in with this impression that even if they face difficulty, they're going to be supported by the community. And I think it's such a strong recruitment point, because you spend so much time in the lab and interacting with other people who are next to you, that you want to be in this type of environment where even when your experiments fail or whatever, your IVF doesn't work, at least there are people around you who are going to support you and try to help you out rather than feeling isolated.
Is there some kind of written manifesto about the way that helps create the culture of the institute, of the unit, or is it just unstated?
Yeah, so I'm not aware of any official manifesto. I think that
maybe
some
we
labs,
should create it.
I think maybe some labs have a sort of a charter of conduct in the lab, but we don't. We don't have anything formally written. There's a lot of discussions. We discuss a lot about things that are, matters arising. And we have this policy of touching base whenever something comes up. And so I think in lieu of having something that is written and maybe formal, we try to keep an open channel of communication at any given point. And this helps to support this type of environment.
So you said recruiting is critical, but how do you make decisions about what your lab was going to work on? How are those made?
So that's a combinatorial effect. So we are curiosity driven. I think most of us are curiosity driven. So it always starts from some type of biological question that you're interested in. What I find particularly exciting in research are these sort of unexpected connections between phenomena. If you're studying a phenomenon of A, and all of a sudden you find that it's related to something you never thought about, I find that amazing, because I think most of the things in biology, and this is featuring a lot during my conversation today, are these combined effects of many different inputs that ultimately lead to some type of a phenotype, to some type of a process. And so if a person comes to me and say, look, I'm interested in whatever tRNA fragments, because we work partly on tRNA fragments, but I want to look at them in a context of whatever biological process I didn't think of, I think that's really interesting. So I find these unexpected connections to be something where like the wealth of my interest lies in. And but of course, I think choosing a project and building a project are also two different things. Because to build a project, you also have to be, to a certain degree, pragmatic. You have to know the state of the field. You have to know your expertise. Can the person do the project in 4 years? Can they graduate if they're following this sort of pie in the sky approach? And so one thing we put a lot of emphasis on is technical excellence. I really try to make sure that we execute the experiments whenever we can to the highest degree of technical excellence whenever possible. And always trying to disprove the hypothesis, always trying to test the hypothesis without trying to prove anything. It's like one of my pet peeves when people say, well, and to prove this, no. And don't do that. Like to test this, take an unbiased approach, because you set yourself up immediately for biasing. If you're trying to prove something, you'll find a way to prove something if you're really persistent, but you should try to disprove it, or at least take an unbiased approach of testing it.
I love that. Is that because I'm thinking about the one late question. I'm going to keep it for later, the second part.
Teaser.
Teaser. You mentioned, I think, Slack before. So I had a question. What is a kind of habit or organization tool that helped you the most in your research career or management, your team now? Is there something you would like to share with us about that?
Sure. But this is going to be so deeply unscientific or maybe even uninspiring. So we have a Slack channel. I have a couple of Slack channels. One is, of course, with the lab. I think the tool that is extremely important as a group leader is calendar. It is insane how good you have to get at managing your calendar. This is an unexpected discovery from PI Life, which I've been in for the last 3 years. And the other thing that helps me enormously, and I know different people work differently, but I live on to-do lists, long-term, short-term. I love to-do lists. I also like to write them manually rather than type them up. It's somehow committing it to memory if I write it on a paper.
So what's your philosophy of the to-do list? Is it long? Is it short? No, because my father and I think my brother, the first thing they always write is something they've already done so that they can cross it off straight away to make them feel good.
It's exactly my philosophy. I will write everything on a to-do list, like turn on computer. On days where I feel unproductive and I feel like it's going to be challenging.
Write to-do list.
Write to-do list. Yeah, because it gives me this sense of satisfaction immediately. I have turned on this computer and then I'll deal with whatever actual thing that I have to do. Planning is really important but having the satisfaction of taking something off your list, even though there will be like another 17 things that you will just think of at that moment, I think maybe it's psychological, but to me at least, it's really helpful.
Do you have an unlimited list of things, or do you limit it in order to, I don't know, not feel too frustrated? How do you end not frustrated of the day because we have so many things to do in the lab?
Yeah, it depends. It totally depends on the day. Some days are like crickets and you're like, why do I have so much time today? And the minute that I think, well, today doesn't seem to be too busy, then another 5 things pop up. You're like, oh yeah, that email, or, I have that deadline. I said I will review that paper. And then I, remember things. But we have an expression in the lab. So sometimes I say that I'm frisky. If you feel frisky, you can do another thing. And so if I feel frisky, I will write a super long to-do list and I will be determined to go through it. And sometimes I'm more realistic and I know myself and I say, okay, set yourself up for not failing right off the bat. Because I agree with you, Renaud. I think that if you write a super long to-do list, it can look so daunting that you don't even want to try. You're just like, oh, I can feel like I'm going to fail, so might not as well try. Some realistic aspect is important.
So the things that don't get crossed off at the end of the day, do they make it onto the to-do list the next day?
No.
No.
No, I'm kidding. Okay. I'm joking.
You don't have these things that are always on the to-do list.
Yeah. It's like New Year's resolutions are always the same.
Yeah.
Next year, I will start going to the gym. It's not happening. But yeah, jokes aside, it depends on the importance. And of course, I think we're all to some degree or to varying degrees responsible adults, and we don't let too many things fall through the cracks. But I find that this is an organizational tool, very old school, that helps me a lot in management.
So we wanted to talk also a little bit about mentoring with you. What is a mentoring practice that you kept from one of your mentors?
Yeah, so I thought about this as well a little bit. And so I kind of want to pose a question to you as well. I have this...
It's our podcast.
I know, right? It's more of a comment.
We hate answering questions.
It's more of a comment than a question.
It's more of a comment than a question. But I have this, I don't know, theory that your success as a scientist is to some degree related to how good your mentors are and how good your relationship is with your mentors. And so I think the most important thing when you are a mentor or when you're trying to look for one is, can you find a person that you can trust, not as a yes man, but as a person who has your back, somebody that you can go to and be frank with. And even if they criticize you or if you get harsh feedback, tough love, that you respect and that you take that in bona fide because they're in your corner and they are trying to improve you and help you improve or help you solve whatever problem you come to them with. And so that's also my philosophy. I try to be the person.
How did you know that? So you had exceptional mentors, right? But how did you know that they were going to be like that?
I think it was mostly the communication. So when I interviewed with Maria Elena, I was still quite young. I was 22 at the time, I think. 22 or 23, but it's still relatively young. And with Maria Elena, it struck me immediately that we communicate very directly with each other, even though, of course, she was a group leader and I wasn't. And so this is a relationship that persisted in the same way, even now, 15 years later. I still think that if I come to her and I, come to her with any type of issue that I might have, she would give me her honest opinion, and I don't necessarily have to agree with it all the time, but I would have this idea that, I would know that it comes from a good place, a place where she wants to see me succeed. And the same with Ollie. Ollie is, of course, quite the character, and I sometimes think that I have to work very hard in my life so that the coolest thing about me is not that I did my postdoc with Ollie Rando. But he is also somebody that I feel like would support me in any way, shape, or form that he could. And I think that's a great mentor. And I think that also at different times in your life and at different times in your career, you're looking for different types as well as extent of support. So choosing your PhD mentor, PhD supervisor, and choosing your postdoc supervisor, maybe even later on when you become a group leader or whatever else you do in your career, you're looking for different qualities. And so maybe there's not a one size fit all when it comes to mentorship.
Can you think of examples of bad mentoring advice that you've seen or you've heard?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think of something, but being sort of inherently positive about things is very difficult to think of. Bad mentoring. I guess maybe people who don't encourage you to take risks. I think that would be a bad mentoring advice. I think being cautious is important, but you shouldn't be encouraged to take a leap of faith, at least every now and then.
So that's you as a mentee. What about now you as a mentor? So how are you navigating that? Are you finding it hard to get the right balance of autonomy and guidance?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still learning. I've had a lab for 3 years.
Don't forget they're listening, Anna.
They're listening. They're gonna make me. They're gonna make memes.
I'm
about
always
this.
worried that when I say these wonderful things about mentoring, that people in the lab are saying he's full of shit.
Yeah. They're like, why doesn't she walk the walk?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm still learning. I think oftentimes I find myself falling into a pitfall of wanting to solve problems rather than guiding people through the problems so they find the solutions, because I am inherently impatient. And I'm just like, okay, you just do A, B, C, D. But that's not the point. The point of a mentor is to have a conversation, to support someone in finding the right way forward rather than saying, you should do this. And so that's been a learning experience. And I'm still learning how to do this. And again, the one size fits all, or the lack of one size fits all, also applies now for me as a mentor. I can clearly tell that certain people in my lab are looking for different things from me compared to others. And so I have an open door policy. I think most of us have an open door policy here and people can walk in. But for any type of more serious advice, I have to tailor my feedback and the delivery of my feedback to different people. So perhaps time will tell. And maybe when they come to the Lonely Pipette, I hope that at least some of them make it to the Lonely Pipette. They can tell you about their experience.
Well, we hope we will be there still.
Oh, for sure.
I was curious because you set up your lab recently. We talk about mentoring. There is this notion we rarely abord it in the podcast about co-mentoring. Did you remember when you started to mentoring? Was it only now as a lab leader or before? What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah. So when I was a postdoc, I was sort of a de facto supervisor of people who were in the lab, but I don't know if that would be considered mentoring in the traditional sense. I think it's different when you're a supervisor, somebody who's directly guiding you towards, an experiment. I had worked very closely with a PhD student in my lab, and so perhaps that was the closest thing to mentoring that I had experienced truly before starting my own lab. It was a learning experience, I think, for both of us, because we both had quite strong personalities, and it took a minute for us to find a way to effectively communicate. And then once that ended up working out well and we learned the idiosyncrasies of each person, then I think it became a good relationship, a really productive relationship. But it's not, I think we underestimate how complex human relationships are, and especially if you're working towards the same goal at different speeds and at different levels, and learning that is it's non-trivial.
So you keep using the word learning, right? So one of the ways to learn is by making mistakes. What do you do when you get it wrong as a young PI?
Yeah, you apologize. I think communicating your mistakes is really important. I think once the deed has been done and you realize that you had made a mistake, you again commit it to memory and file it under things not to do in a similar situation. And secondly, you talk to the person, you say, okay, I advised you to this, or I reacted in a poor way, or I think that's also acceptable. If anything, it should be the norm to acknowledge that you had made a mistake at that time. And it's easier said than done because we all, we're quite stubborn sometimes and we think, well, it's my way or the highway. But when you do realize that you have made a mistake, I think it's fine to say, sorry, this wasn't the best the advice that I've given you and I should have reacted in a different way, for example.
Do you have a handwritten not to do list as well?
I don't know. No, not really, but count to 10. Give me strength not to react in the way that I want to react at the time. Yeah, certain checkpoints there, and be like, okay, just take a breather. You'll forget about it in 5 minutes. It's not that bad. Let's move on.
This is great. So we're gonna take a break, and after the break, we're gonna hear more about Ana out of the lab.
Hey folks, don't run away. You're listening to The Lonely Pipette with Renaud Pourpre and Jonathan Weissman, where our goal is to help scientists do better science.
If you're enjoying the show and you want to learn more, you can follow us on Twitter at Lonely Pipette, and please share the podcast with your friends.
If you don't want to miss any of our future episodes, you can subscribe to our mailing list and join our community. Click on the subscription link on our Twitter account.
It's as simple as that. Take a few moments to get more tips from the Lonely Pipette. Welcome back. You're listening to the Lonely Pipette, and we're discussing tips from Ana Boskovic. I hope I got that right. So we wanted to hear a bit about how things happen outside of the lab. Do you have a morning routine? How does the day start?
Yeah. So I started
You
my
thought
day.
about this, right?
I did.
Yeah, like shit. I have to have a morning routine.
No, I come
I got to
prepared.
invent one.
I'm also like much of your former guests. I started with coffee. Nothing happens before coffee, and so I wake up actually quite early.
What does early mean?
Maybe like 6.
Okay, cool.
To me, this is early. I think
Yeah.
it's all relative.
Yeah.
But I wake
Is
up.
that so? You have to force yourself to get out of bed.
It's interesting. I'm not normally an early riser, but there's a person in my apartment building who sets an alarm for like the last year. They've been setting this alarm at stupid o'clock. And I thought, well, I can ignore it for a minute. And then I realized, okay, if I wake up at 6, I have this uninterrupted hour of time before I need to do anything. And then I have my coffee, and then I'll scroll through my email, because I think I have a relatively unhealthy relationship with my email, because I always check email. And then I'll do a bit of social media scrolling, reply to some messages. And that's my morning routine. It kind of eases into the day. And sometimes if I feel frisky, then I'll also have a coffee somewhere in the neighborhood, because in Italy you can get, the world's best coffee and the cornetto for €2, and it's amazing. And then I'll go to work. And so I come to work, normally I come to work pretty early as well, maybe around 8:30. And this is the quiet time. And I think this is my most productive time in the day, because the lab, my students and my postdocs, they trickle in a bit later. They stay
They're
later
Italian,
than me.
right?
It's a mix.
Okay.
So we're half about Italian and non-Italian. But this is like the early morning time, both at home and in the office, are the quiet, productive times.
Wow.
And then things pick up. And this is where it's kind of, triage mode and figuring out what to do, going through your endless to-do list. So yeah, that's
So when do
kind
you?
of
So
where I
that's
start.
interesting. When do you write the to-do list?
Sometimes, most often on the train. I take a train. It's about 20 minutes from Rome to Monterotondo. And this is, again, where my brain is still quiet and waking up. And then I think, okay, what do I need to do today? What's left from yesterday? What can I do maybe a bit extra so I don't have to do it tomorrow? And then I come to the lab and I already have a set list. And of course, you know your schedule, and you have your weekly or biweekly meetings with the people, or lab meeting, or sometimes I have an experiment to do. So I plan for that.
What does the end of the day look like? How do you wind down?
Kind of in the same way. So because of this train ride, it really helps me to sort of separate from whatever was happening at that point in the lab. So it's a ramp up and a ramp down approach. And then more often than not, another benefit of living in Rome is just the weather is always nice. And I live in a busy neighborhood. And so I will walk around the neighborhood a little bit and get some food or look at the shops, something that is kind of getting me in touch with the world around me outside of the lab. And then I'll get home. And sometimes if I have, pressing things to do, I'll do maybe 1 or 2 more things. I know now, you become a little bit more self-aware when you get older. But I know that if I want to sleep decently, I need to stop working at a certain point, because otherwise my brain just never stops. And then I cannot fall asleep. And then the next day it kind of propagates. And so I know that the cutoff point is like 8:30 p.m. or 9 p.m. After that, I will not read a paper. Like, no way. Because I know that there would be no way that I would ramp down. And then I'll do something fun, listen to some music, doom scroll through the internet, do something that is not related to lab.
Okay. I can relate to the 1 hour piece in the morning because I'm experimenting a little bit of writing, and this is the only time I can do that. If not, it's always in a hurry or other stuff. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. It's good to hear that we have similar schedules.
Do you have a favorite failure or a secret fear you would like to share with us, and what you learned from it, for example?
Well, for many years, I have had the fear of new protocols. This sounds so weird, but I was so afraid of things, before I would start doing them, and I would go through them for 50 different times. I would read through the protocol 50 different times, and then I would do it and realize, why was I so afraid of this? And so this has always been a little bit, I guess, also a challenging moment, is to you know that you're afraid of something and you're fearful of its failure, but nonetheless doing it. I don't know if I have a favorite failure. I can remember very vividly some like stupid things, like plain dumb things that I have done in the lab. Like in the 4th or 5th year of my postdoc, like senior postdoc, independent, great. And I do this thing when you put the electrodes in 2 different sockets in the wrong way, and they're color coded. And I'm like, who are you? Why do you do this? And it's such a humbling moment because you can become too confident. You're like, I got this. I know what to do.
You remind me of my PhD supervisor. Was very tough with everyone in the lab, and he would always tell us, you idiot, you put it the wrong way around, and you would always feel terrible. And one lunchtime, he went off for lunch, and we looked at his gel, and we saw that he'd put the things the wrong way around, and we were like, let's just leave it.
Exactly. Exactly. I think it really, sometimes these humbling moments are so necessary. Of course, you laugh about it if it's not a super critical sample, but it's just, makes me wonder who you are. I remember also one thing. So when I started in Maria Elena's lab, this was a really outstanding environment at the time, and I'm sure it's still now, but it was really a formative experience. And I was sharing a bench with this senior postdoc who was like the super postdoc. I still think he's just outstanding, and I can have a lab, and I have now 7 people in the lab, and I think I'm quite good at what I do. But whenever I see him, I see him as this sort of unattainable level of science. And I remember trying to load a gel, just an agarose gel that was flipped upside down. And he looked at me like I couldn't understand why I wouldn't load. Anyways, things like that are some of the sort of mistakes that you make. But again, in a formative time of your life, and you remember them forever, and you never do them again because, they become engraved in your memory. And so now I'm always like, red, red, black, black. They are matching. Let's go. You never make it again.
What's the most adventurous thing you've ever done, and would you do it again?
In science, or?
It can be in science or outside science.
I guess, I don't know. There are some adventurous things that I have done when I was a PhD student with some friends. We used to go to these concerts, sometimes on a whim. And it wasn't like cool concerts and things. It was very like considered a bit nerdy. But because they were on a whim and they were sort of semi-planned, I would consider that to be adventurous, especially since some of them happened like 2 months before I had to graduate, and there was a pile of things that I needed to do. I guess in science, it's again, maybe a little bit of a boring answer, but following the things that you're not necessarily sure that they would work. And so, for example, my postdoc project I thought was really adventurous. And I remember coming to Ollie with I have this hypothesis and I want to test this hypothesis and I think this could be correct. And Ollie's like, cool, dude. I don't think that's going to work, but you should go for it and try it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, then, we'll figure out how deep you are in it and try to pull you out. And so I think that was, I think my whole postdoc experience was quite an adventure.
What is something that people would be surprised to discover about you?
That's a tough question. Again, coming from the fact of being so extroverted, I don't know. My social battery also runs out occasionally. I don't mind spending some time by myself because in a social context, we're having a conversation or we're out at dinner. I feel very energized most of the time. But then there's just days where I'm like, no, I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to see anyone. I just want to read a book or, do something completely mindless. And I think, if people who don't know me very well would be surprised because normally I'm quite, bubbly.
So if we got you on one of those, out for dinner evenings, can you think of 3 people from history, alive or dead, that you would like to sit down for dinner with? Your heroes or your people you would like to meet?
Yeah, F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Scientist F. Scott Fitzgerald. Wow.
Yeah, I think he'd be really cool because I really like the way that he writes or the way that he wrote.
Wow, great.
And I think, the Roman emperors would have been awesome.
Oh.
We're so surrounded by...
Yeah.
Sorry?
Do you have a favorite Roman emperor?
I do, actually.
Okay, who's...
I don't think he's like the best one, but so there is a Roman emperor that was born close to Split, close to where I'm from.
Okay, yeah.
And he founded the city of Split. And his name was Diocletian. And he was a bit of a character, it seems, according to history. He was also, I think, quite brutal of an emperor, but, let's put that on the side. So besides the fact that he was from where I am from, so immediately there's this 2,000-year difference, but also connection. He is the only emperor that abdicated. He was like, you know what, guys, I'm done. And so he ended up building himself a palace.
I finished my to-do list.
Exactly. He was like, I'm done here. This is getting out of hand. And he built himself a retirement home, which is now the city of Split.
In Split.
Exactly.
I've been to Split in the 80s, yeah.
And so he kind of knew when to stop. And then they called him back and they were like, hey, things are not working really well. We're having this crisis of governance. You should come back. He was like, no, I'm good. And I thought that was quite funny because he wasn't executed or he wasn't forced to leave in some way, but he kind of knew when to quit and enjoy the good life afterwards.
Cool. Do you think he'd get on well with F. Scott Fitzgerald?
Nah, probably. They were both, I guess they were both hedonistic to some degree.
Okay. If you had 100 million euros to spend in science, but not in experiment, how will you spend them?
Oh my goodness. Is this a proposition or Genova Grant?
Right. Yeah, we've been speaking to Edith Heard and she's interested in your response.
Yeah, now the pressure is on. I would fund the next generation of scientists. That's not in direct experiments, but I would try to fund and promote the next generation of scientists, especially maybe focusing on people who are underprivileged and come from underprivileged backgrounds, so that they have the same chance in life and the same chance in science to follow their dreams. I think that's really important.
Have you found it hard as a Croatian and as a woman? Has that been difficult?
Well, I don't know. It's a tough question because I don't have anything to compare it with on account of only being a woman scientist from Croatia. But I think because my PhD was done in a lab of a young woman PI who had only just started at the time, I always thought, well, I see from Marielena's example that you can absolutely do this if you're dedicated and hardworking and have good ideas and hire good people. So I think that was important. And I realized that not everybody, in fact, not almost no one has that type of exposure early on. What I found sometimes is that sort of level of envy or maybe the difficulty comes from when you start becoming successful and people start making sort of offhanded remarks. You're gonna have an easier easier time finding a job because you're a woman and people are trying to hire women. And I think that's such an offhanded comment and rightfully incorrect. And I didn't experience this before I started going onto the job market. And I think these types of comments, I don't know if they come from, poor education or some deep level of insecurity.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Jealousy or something. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to sort of justify somebody getting an opportunity because of X, Y, and Z, and not because the person is hardworking or good or has good ideas.
Yeah.
So you'd use your big amount of money to support young researchers from across the world. If I flip the question and ask at the other end of the scale, can you think of a purchase of $100 or less that's impacted your life?
A mouse pipette.
A mouse?
Pasteur mouth pipette, a Pasteur pipette, combined with a little piece of rubber that you can use to pipette embryos. And it costs zero money. And it has arguably opened a lot of doors for me in my life. And it was very cheap. And so recently, actually, this is a semi-funny story, I guess. I've had these dissection tools for many years. And they're all like crooked and, messed up because I've been using them and like sometimes I drop them and so forth. And so my lab, because it grew, we bought a lot of new equipment and a lot of new tools. And so I did this vanity purchase of buying myself a new set of tools. And then I realized, I used them and I was like, I can also do this with old tools. It was such a vanity purchase because sometimes you do need things and you buy them because you need them and either because the other ones broke or you simply didn't have them before. But oftentimes I think sometimes the cheap equipment also opens a lot of doors.
Do you have I'm back to the question I wanted to ask you at the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you have a sentence written on your office door? And if not, what could it be?
We have a couple. Also, my lab made a lot of memes for my birthday. So there's lots of memes around the office. Something that I wrote, not on the door, but in UMass, is that the plural of anecdote is not data. So you need to do the experiments many times in a controlled manner. So it's not anecdotal.
Is that really on your office door?
Not now. It used to be at UMass. I had it above my bench.
Okay, I like that. That's good.
The plural of anecdotes, not data. That's really important. And one thing that Ollie said, and I think it resonates still with me very strongly, he said, you can't be the winner. Like, you shouldn't do science if you want to be the winner of science. You should do science because you're interested in something and not because you want to be the scientist, right? And I think oftentimes we need to remind ourselves that the goal is not to be the best of all. It's try to do the best research that you can. Don't try to be the winner of science.
That's great. So we always end up with the question asking our guests if they met themselves 20 years ago, at the beginning of your career, when you're still doing a undergrad in Croatia, what advice would you give to yourself?
Ooh, tough question. Yeah, don't be afraid of protocols. People are, it's just experience. You can do it.
Have you been treated for this protocol phobia?
No, it's just you have to go through it. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough question because, people are always like, I would do the same things. And I probably would, to some degree, do the same things. But I guess I would tell myself 20 years ago, you're going to meet some really smart people, listen to what they have to say, learn from them, and, really learn how to listen what people are saying. And I think that's an important point. I learned eventually, but, there's always this pushback when people criticize and you think, well, this is reflecting on me as a person, but not really. Learn to hear the advice that people are giving you. Learn to listen to the questions that they're asking you and think about before you answer.
Fantastic. This has been great. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
They can find it on the website. So we have a EMBL website. And my lab is currently making a dedicated one for the lab. And so if you're interested in learning more, please go ahead and visit that. I'm semi-active on social media. And so if you want to get in touch with me, you can do that directly via email. Please do. Shameless plug, especially if you're a computational biologist interested in, early embryos. Contact me in any way. I'm fairly responsive and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you both.
Is there anything else you would like to add to finish up?
Yeah, we love the podcast. Thanks for having me. It's a little, when Jonathan told me about the invitation, I thought, well, this is when the imposter syndrome kicks in because my former supervisor was on it and my current DG and boss was one of the guests, and I was like, what can I contribute? But it was a really nice conversation and I really enjoyed it. And I hope that at least some of the things that I had said are going to be useful or inspiring or amusing to your listeners.
So
We're sure of it.
You've been great, and as I said, so my PhD student is one of your biggest fans, and she, with the sort of insinuation, why can't you be more like Anna? So,
well, you know,
there we go.
I don't think anybody should be too much like Anna.
So that's it for this episode. Thank you for joining us at The Lonely Pipette.
We hope that you learned something new, that something resonated with your own experiences, or that you just enjoyed the science.
Let us know your thoughts on Twitter at Lonely Pipette, and please share it with your friends in the lab. If you want to join our community, you can subscribe to the Lonely Pipette mailing list or mail us by following the link available on our Twitter profile. You will receive the next episodes directly in your mailbox. How cool is that?
Stay tuned for the next show, and remember, you might feel like a lonely pipette, but it doesn't mean you're alone. Tips from the Lonely Pipette can help you to do better science.
À bientôt!
À bientôt!